Hi, I'm Gloria Masters, and it's such an honour to be on this show today with Betty and looking at near-death experiences and the spiritual component of all of that. I think is something fairly relevant to me. My backstory was not a simple one. In fact, it's one of the worst cases of child sex abuse and trafficking globally. And I don't say that lightly, but there is hope amidst all of it. And the reality for me is that I was born into a family where child sexual abuse and trafficking was the norm. And I can say that with confidence because it was my father who trafficked me from a very young age to his friends and family, and that was to grow exponentially as I got bigger to include other more formalized groups. But it was his mother, my grandmother, who trained me in the art of seduction and how to please men. Now, this all began, the training she began on me was when I was just a little 5-year-old. But prior to that, I'd been sexualized from birth. Pretty dark times, pretty scary times, and lots of things unfolded. But what I was able to do and what I recognized from quite a young age was that I had little beings around me, and I can only describe them as they were like little fairies. And I know children have this ability to speak to beyond what they can see. And unfortunately, that gets lost as we get older. But reality being that those little beings were around me, and I now know them as my angels. And what would happen is I would be particularly traumatized or just feeling quite lonely, and I would sense them out of the corner of my eye. And they were so beautiful and they were so light filled and just full of love and joy that I just wanted to play with them. And I can remember feeling very special that I had them because I didn't really have a living person who was interested in looking after me or caring for me. The reality was, I remember from probably when I was about 3.5, my father was particularly angry that day and grabbed me by the arm and threw me into what was known as an apple crate back in the day. So it was a wooden box with slats in it. He was very angry and decided to put me into this apple crate and then nail another one on top. And what that meant was that I could breathe, but I was quite shocked and I was quite scared and I didn't know what to do. And there was no way I could get out of that box. And I remember crying and I remember just wanting to be let out. And the time seemed to pass and it got a little darker and it felt more scary. And I had a situation where I noticed these little fluffy wings around me. I heard the sound first of little fluttering wings, and that's when I was able to reach out to my beautiful little angels or fairies, as I was calling them back then. I know they were spiritual. I know they were spirits around me, and I know they were there to protect me. And that gave me something I didn't otherwise have, which was hope. And I sure needed that. So as I grew a little older, and some of what I was required to do was worse and more traumatic for me, the angels grew as I did, and there were situations where, I was being trafficked to very big men who were willing to pay a lot of money to abuse me, and my father then made a lot of money as well. And what I hadn't realized was my grandmother was being paid a commission. So my fate was sealed fairly much, and I didn't have a mother who was interested in looking out for me. She's what I would call a very complex, wounded narcissist, so there was no love available to me unless I did something for her, which is quite bizarre when you think about it because I was a child. But that is the nature and that is the environment in which I grew and was raised. My only safe space was at school, and it was at school I could actually be me, and it was at school that I could release some of the tension and the trauma I was carrying. So beyond grateful to have had that, and also to know that around me were some amazing angels. Interestingly, without them, I don't know that I would have made it through. And we're talking about my life as being, full of child sexual abuse, being trafficked, being thrown into the back of the van at night and taken to groups. And as I grew and as the acts I was required to perform grew in nature and horror, the family decided it was best to drug me because then I was compliant. No one wanted to waste money on a traumatized and frightened child. So that's what happened. I would beg and cry and pray and call out, help me, save me, see me, but no living person did. And so it became on me to actually stop looking outside of myself and start to look within. And that's where I developed more of that spiritual component. And that's where I was able to keep myself as safe or as grounded or as optimistic as possible, because as small children do, I was born with an optimism and a curiosity and a fun streak, which I still have today, luckily. So having that deeper inward facing spiritual component mean I could at least talk to what I now believe to be my higher self. So just to let you know that I was leased out of a nightclub. I was put in the back room of that nightclub in our red light district in Auckland, New Zealand, and their men and women would pay to abuse me. Out of that same nightclub, I was required to perform in child sexual abuse materials, including videos and still images, and they made money out of that. And those were the old projector reels, so I could hear the tick, tick, tick as the wheels turned and the recording continued. And it was during those sessions that I actively chose to approach the softest, kindest looking pedophile, because I knew they wouldn't hurt me as much if I could appeal to their softer nature. Note that it wasn't a parent or grandparent, it was a softer natured looking pedophile I would go to. As well as that, once I became pubescent, my grandmother performed many forced abortions on me simply because no one wanted a pregnant child or teenager to deal with. And that was pretty horrendous and traumatic for me as well. And I'm very lucky to have made it through. I endured all of this horror until I was 16 years of age. And it was then that I no longer had to see my father again, so I chose not to. That might sound easy, but that was one of the hardest things I ever did, simply because he was so scary to deal with. And the only reason that I made it through was because I didn't have to see him and perform anymore. So in terms of the light within, the spirituality I developed, and my angels who are still with me today, I'm very lucky that Gabriel, Michael and Raphael are my key ones. They've always protected me. And I know that's a bit of an oxymoron when you consider what my life was like. But they certainly did protect me, and I wouldn't be here today without them. A part of what I did to survive was to go to that deeper place and just ask for help. And there were some days where I couldn't get through the day. I didn't feel I could. So I'd be prompted by them to maybe get through the next hour. And if that felt too hard, I went to a minute. And those were the hard ones. Those were the hard days. And I just knew I always had something to look at and something I could focus on. And it was through them that I got that. So I guess the message from me to everyone, and there will be survivors watching this, hello, beautiful ones, is that there's always hope. There's always the deeper part of you that knows truth and that can be relied on. And it's time to look inside rather than constantly looking out. The good news is I've been able to turn my whole life around, not easily, not quickly, but over decades. And I'm now an author, I'm a founder, and I'm an advocate for adult survivors of child sexual abuse, as well as a very strong protector and advocate for protection and safety of children. So it was me, Gloria Masters, who launched the Global Hand Sign for children to use if they are not safe and being abused. And the great news is this is being used across the world. I get reached out to constantly about people seeing the sign. So very grateful to have that as a legacy. And I know that through the teachings in my books that people are being helped. And I'm grateful to have that capability, because not all of us who survive horror of this type make it through. So I guess that is me in a nutshell, and grateful to share the story with you.
Thanks for sharing, Gloria. You've had such a contrasted experience, and I really appreciate you sharing, and I'm grateful to hold space with you today. I want to ask you some questions about the survivors that we know are going to be watching this because there's so many people out there that deal with this, but maybe don't talk about it. Can you share a little bit about what your journey was like coming out and talking about your experience and really breaking that shame away? But how did you cultivate the courage to have enough bravery to actually come out and say it in public?
Yes, look, it took me until I was just about to publish my memoir. So we're going back nearly 4 years. And I'd never spoken about my story because the shame was so big and I'd always been blamed. And DAVO'd, which is deny, attack, reverse the order of victim and offender, so that the offender is seen as the victim, which is quite interesting. But what I did once I decided to publish the book was hold my head up high and get interviewed, which meant that my voice would be public and other survivors could hear. And I felt that if I shared that, then it might give them some hope. So the way I handed the shame back, which is the name of my charity, is handing the shame back, because that is actually what we as survivors do when we find our voices. We are handing the shame back because it was never ours to begin with. It didn't belong to us. We were children. We had no choice. So I'm grateful for naming that charity and for the power it has. Alongside that is a podcast I do, which is now in 91 countries across the world, and it's dedicated to survivors of this. But it's not an easy thing to find our voices, and I would caution survivors watching that you don't have to do a big public thing like me. Handing the shame back might involve you just sharing with a trusted friend, or talking to a counsellor, or journaling what happened to you. There are many quieter ways of handing the shame back, but you'll know because you'll feel lighter, you'll feel less burdened, you'll feel less vilified and more vindicated.
You for that reflection. Just to hear that it's not some super linear journey, like you just come out. It took you a long time to do it, and
Yeah.
I'm so grateful that you did. So, while we're coupling this with the idea of spirituality, forgiveness is such a huge part of the spiritual journey. And I'm wondering if you can share about what has your experience been like with forgiveness, forgiving your perpetrators and forgiving the people around you.
Yeah, so forgiveness is an interesting one, and I have a slightly different take on it, which I'm proud to share. My second book, Flight Path to Healing, which is a guide for survivors, is has a chapter devoted to this as well because it's big. I was so resistant and so angry and so disgusted with how I was treated by my family and those tasked with caring for me that I held on to being right and them being wrong, that I didn't need to forgive because they didn't deserve it, and that was at least some power I had. But once I began to do more and more work on it through that second book and looked at all the healing I'd done, I made a decision, and it was simply this: the forgiveness or lack of forgiveness in me was actually only hurting me. I had no contact with any of my abusers or their enablers. So they didn't even know that I was holding on to this. And I decided I will forgive, not for anyone else, but for me, for the deeper part of me, for my spiritual self, but also for that beautiful little girl who had to be traded and trafficked and treated so terribly. I needed to forgive for that child part of me and for me. So once I did, I felt incredibly light and much less burdened.
That's beautiful. So, yeah, I've heard the quote that resentment is like you drinking poison, waiting for the other person to die. So, kind of same thing applies how you're describing your experience with it. I'm wondering if you've ever heard of the spiritual concept of pre-birth planning, that we plan our lives before we get here. If you have any views on that coming from such a like horrendous childhood, do you feel that that is a spiritual truth? Do you feel like it doesn't apply?
Look, I think there's aspects to all of it. I think I had thought that I chose this path because I needed to learn, and I needed to learn some things around forgiveness and humility and compassion. But then over time, I've morphed that slightly into actually, no, I chose this because I was meant to come down here to actually help change the planet and to help serve. And my purpose in life, and I have no choice because it's so big within me, is to help others through shine light on this darkness through love and humility, and that's what I do. So
So empowering just to hear as a person listening to you talk, like the spiritual autonomy or just taking action in your healing and your journey and not being victimized by something that a lot of people would hear your story and be like, wow, that's, there's no way to escape that kind of victimization.
um,
And just to hear
mm,
your strength of rising above is so empowering just from a listener perspective.
yeah.
So thank you. Again, I'm really blown away by your testimony. It's really, really powerful. Can you share with me today what your experience is like with your angels, with your guides? Have they been with you in the book writing process and this whole process of stepping out and standing in your truth?
Yeah, the interesting thing with my angels and guides is I don't have a choice. They're with me all the time. They wake me up during the night. They're giving me titles for the next books. They're telling me what I should put in the book. They're choosing, it's them. It's Handing the Shame Back was them. The podcast was all them. The name of my third book, Keeping Kids Safe, which is the one that gives safe adults and teachers and parents, the safe ones, the toolkit to what to look for and how to protect your kids. All of that it hasn't just been me. I get downloaded to the point where I think, can I not just go back to sleep, please? So yeah, this is very much is very much a co-joined effort, a collaboration, if you will. And I do get channeled, and in the writing of my book, I'll find myself thinking, oh, I just wrote that. Why did I write that? Well, I wrote that because Gabriel, Michael, and Raphael decided it needs to be in there. And I've learned not to ignore them, because if I ignore them, they just come back at me harder. So I am so, so grateful. I've got these beautiful big angels. They're massive now, obviously. Beautiful big angels who guide me and protect me. And look, I'm still a human being. I've still got feet as well as angel wings, but they do pull me into line, but they also protect me. And sometimes I think I know what I'm doing and what I need, and they'll just put roadblocks in the way. So I've learnt that the roadblocks are their protection, because I'm not meant to see that, do that, or interact with.
Yes. Rejection is redirection or God's protection. Let me ask
Yes,
you a question that's coming up for me while we're talking about this. Do you think
go.
that everybody has access to angels and guides? And when I say that, I'm thinking more about the perpetrators. Do you feel like they're protected as well? Or tell me your thoughts around that.
Yeah, look, I believe that we all have access. I'm nothing special in that every human being alive has always had that innate ability to go within and see and connect with the deeper part of ourselves through the angels and through guides, or whatever modality you wish to describe it as. I'm not going to say it has to be angels. But I also think we have free will, and I think this is the kicker. Now, for some people, why would they have angels with them? Well, they have free will. They've chosen to do dark things and to inflict harm. But what we know, and what a lot of people may not realize, in my humble opinion, is that the person we really have to be cognizant of and most aware of is the person we see in the mirror, because it's us we have to live with. So I wouldn't want to be those people that are choosing to hurt children and abuse children and traffic children, because one day you're going to have to face into yourself, and that is going to be the day where the reckoning occurs. And I don't believe that if you make a decision, and again, we're going back to free will, if you make a decision to hurt a child and abuse a child, you have taken their life. You've taken their spirit from them, and it takes a lot of courage for them to reconnect, recover, meet again, introduce, and connect with who they always were. It can take a lifetime, and unfortunately, some of our beautiful survivor community don't make it. And this is not uncommon. We all, as survivors, have had those moments where we would choose not to be here. So for the ones that do make it, I applaud you. And one of the t-shirts I designed for our charity is, I see you, I stand beside you, and I believe you, because those are the most powerful words a survivor can ever hear. So I hope that helps.
It's really helpful. Yeah, thank you. I love listening to a very human experience and hearing a spiritual perspective on it. And I think that it gives the person a lot of freedom. I'm curious, can you share some advice? A lot of people who listen to our channel are people who are maybe they're struggling in their human life, so they're listening to near-death experiences because they want to hear some hope. Maybe they're dealing with some of the same struggles that you're talking about. What kind of advice would you offer somebody really dealing with something challenging in their life?
Yeah, look, I believe, and I just did a post on this morning actually on Facebook. I believe that there are two things that happen in our lives. One is stuff or events or situations that bring us joy. So that's easy. That makes us happy. We become elevated, neuron pathways open up, like it's all good. We then have the other aspect. Again, this is just my spiritual belief, which is stuff we don't like. And I've learned to reframe it in a couple of ways. So one is this: what is it here to teach me? And the second is, it's helping me grow. Because if everything was perfect and happy all the time, I wouldn't grow, and I don't think anybody else would. But in answer to the question, if you are struggling as an amazing survivor or non-survivor watching this, I just want you to know that hope is the last thing to die. So if you can, look outside, find something in nature. It might be a flower. It might be some water. It might be the beach. It might be a tree. It might be a rock on the ground or a shell. Whatever it is, find it, look at it deeply, and evoke the five senses if you can. So in order to do that, you simply close your eyes and see what you can smell. And it might be that the flower that you saw is evoking a lovely sense in you of smell. It might be that you reach out and touch that flower so you feel the sense of it against your fingertips. It might be that as you're closing your eyes, you hear the sound. It could be some birds singing. And it could be that you might even feel like you want to, I'm not saying you should, but if you wanted to taste what that was like, do that. Basically, we're trying to evoke the five senses so that we can ground ourselves. And when we're grounded, we're calmer. And what we know about the human mind is that it cannot hold calm and stress at the same time, and calm will always win. So I think that's a very practical tip to share. And I think another one on that: when hope feels the last thing to die, I want you to immediately think of one thing that feels positive to you. Now, it might be that you woke up and the sun just came in your window and you thought, wow, it's going to be a beautiful day. Or it could be you're grateful to your partner because they made you a cup of tea before they left for work. Or it could be that you've got a day off. I don't know. But the more we focus on what is, the more likely we are to bring that in.
Wow, thank you, Gloria. I want to ask another question, and if you don't feel comfortable, I can edit it out later. So don't worry. It was just something that's coming up for me. So because you've experienced so much trauma in this one area of your life, I'm wondering, do you feel like you've healed? Are you able to enjoy this aspect of human life now, even with all of the past trauma?
Yes, of course. So you're talking about sex as an adult survivor.
Yes.
It's an interesting one. I just wrote a blog about that last week, actually. For us as adult survivors, sexuality can be challenging, and it is challenging because we were children and that was taken from us at a time in our lives where we didn't understand it. We didn't have cognition around it. And so sex can evoke in us as adults the feelings of guilt or shame or fear, and guilt because we might experience pleasure, whereas we know that the body will respond to stimulation. It's like if I put a flower under your nose and tickled your nose, you're probably going to sneeze. That's just what the body does. If you're outside in the snow, you're going to start shivering. That's what the body does. If your genitals are being stimulated, you're going to respond because that's what the body does. And I think normalizing these conversations and airing them. Thank you so much for raising it. Is so important. So yes, I'm healed from that, but I'm also lucky to have a partner who's very supportive and encouraging as well. I think that helps.
Thank you. I think transparency when it comes to things like this is so important. A lot of times in spiritual spaces, there's a lot of bypassing that goes on. So you'll hear like, light and love, let it go, and you're just supposed to evaporate all of these things. And there is a process of healing that happens. And you speaking about yours alone is just absolute testimony that there's absolutely light through the darkness. So that's what
Yes,
I'm getting out of your story,
yes,
is that there really is hope at the end of very challenging circumstances.
yes, yes.
So thank you so much for sharing about it. And I just want to see if there's anything else that you'd like to share to feel more complete about our time together.
Oh, lovely. Thank you, Betty. I hope it's been what you have been wanting. But I did want to share that, this book was my memoir, On Angel's Wings, clearly, and I think you'll love the subtext. On Angel's Wings, My Flight from Trauma to Grace. So these are all available on Amazon in all versions and gloriamasters.com. But that's my memoir. It's not an easy read because it's very transparent and truthful. My second book, once I'd done my healing, was Flight Path to Healing, and I love it. I love the plane taking off. Each survivor gets a boarding pass because they've survived what they've had to. At the end, they get a passport or certificate acknowledging the courageous journey they've been on. It's divided into amazing modules for them to experientially work through. And as a survivor, I know what worked for me, so that's what's in here. And then full circle was this one, which my angels were determined I published last year. And it's on keeping kids safe. And it's a roadmap, as you can see, the GPS components. And it's actually information, instruction, practical strategy for safe adults to help protect our beautiful children and teenagers. So lots of useful tidbits there. And for adult survivors watching, go to handingtheshameback.org and lots of free tips, techniques, and ideas for you to use. It's with my pleasure. And the podcast on YouTube, it's also across all podcast channels, is Handing the Shame Back. And it's there every week. I interview a survivor and in a safe environment, gently interview because their story may help one other survivor watching, and we know it does, and people feel less alone. So I do a lot, but I'm so grateful I've been chosen and that I have come here to help give people a bit of light in the darkness and some hope.
I honor your soul's mission and I thank you for your service to the collective. You are a badass, Gloria. I'm really grateful that I got to spend time with you today, like for
Yay!
real. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you
I'm
so
so
much.
glad. I knew I had to reach back out to you because I knew once you and I started speaking, you'd be going, oh my
You
goodness.
are a masterpiece, truly. I
Yes.
thank you for your service and we'll see you next time.
Okay, will you?